The rain on Halcyon Station didn't fall. It hovered. Suspended droplets shimmered in midair, each bead of water frozen by the station's atmospheric stabilizers, a luxury reserved for the wealthy districts orbiting the core of the Orion trade ring. Light from passing ships refracted through the droplets, turning the entire promenade into a glittering corridor of slow-moving stars. Naira Vex stepped through them without hesitation. The droplets parted around her cloaked form, her body field humming softly as it displaced the artificial rain. Her boots made no sound. Her breathing was measured, controlled. Her pulse steady. Assassins didn't rush. They arrived. Her target was already inside. Dr. Elias Cade. Human. Engineer. Revolutionary. Problem. Naira paused at the edge of the cafe dome, watching him through the curved, transparent steel window. The establishment was small, tucked away from the main traffic lanes. Not a place for someone of his importance, which meant one of two things. He was careless, or he was dangerous. Inside, Elias sat alone at a table, hunched over something that looked almost laughably primitive, an actual ceramic mug. Steam rose from it, curling into the air like a ghost. His fingers wrapped around it, not as if he needed the warmth, but as if he appreciated it. Naira narrowed her eyes. No guards. No drones. No perimeter alarms. It didn't make sense. Her internal HUD flickered with mission parameters. Target: Elias Cade. Status: unprotected. Action: terminate. Complication: unknown. She exhaled slowly. Unknowns didn't scare her, but they demanded respect. Naira stepped inside. The cafe door chimed softly. Elias looked up. Not startled, not alarmed, just aware. Their eyes met across the room. For a moment, time seemed to stretch, like the suspended rain outside. Naira expected recognition. Fear. A sudden move. Instead, Elias did something far more unsettling. He smiled. Cold out there? He asked casually. Naira didn't answer. She moved toward him with deliberate steps, her cloak shifting to reveal the faint outline of a concealed weapon. The cafe was nearly empty, just a few scattered patrons, their attention absorbed in their own quiet worlds. Perfect. She stopped at his table. Dr. Elias Cade, she said. Yes. His voice was calm. Unshaken. You know who I am? Elias tilted his head slightly. I have a good guess. Naira's fingers twitched, ready to draw. And yet, she said, you stayed. I did. Why? Elias glanced at the empty chair across from him. Sit, he said. Naira didn't move. That wasn't a request. Neither is mine, he replied gently. But I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. Silence stretched between them. Naira calculated. Probability of trap, low. Probability of hidden defense, moderate. Probability of psychological manipulation, high. She pulled out the chair and sat. Elias slid the mug across the table toward her. Naira stared at it. Steam curled upward, carrying a faint, unfamiliar scent, earthy, bitter, warm. What is it? She asked. Coffee, he said. Human. Naira didn't touch it. Poison. No. Sedative. No. Tracking Manites. Elias chuckled softly. No. Naira leaned forward slightly. You expect me to believe that? I expect you to verify it. She scanned the mug with her internal systems. No toxins. No foreign agents. No nanotech. Just liquid. Hot. Simple. Naira frowned. Why? Elias leaned back in his chair. Because, he said, you've traveled a long way to kill me, and I think you deserve a moment to rest first. Naira blinked. The words didn't compute. Assassins weren't offered rest. They were anticipated, avoided, eliminated, not welcomed.
"You're stalling," she said.
Of course I am, Elias replied easily. But not for the reason you think. Naira's gaze hardened. Then explain. Elias nodded toward the mug. Drink, he said. And I will. Naira hesitated. This was wrong. Everything about this was wrong. Her training screamed at her to end it now. Draw the blade. Strike fast. Complete the mission. But something held her back.
Curiosity.
A dangerous flaw. She lifted the mug. The heat seeped into her fingers, unfamiliar and oddly grounding. Naira brought it to her lips.
Paused.
Then took a small sip. The taste hit her immediately. Bitter, sharp, but layered with something deeper. Warmth spread through her, not just physically, but in a way she couldn't quite define. She lowered the mug slowly. Elias watched her, not with triumph, but with quiet interest. Well, he asked. Naira didn't answer right away. It's strange, she admitted. Elias smiled. That's a good word for it. Naira set the mug down. Talk. Elias folded his hands on the table. You were sent because of my work, he began. Yes. You know what I'm building? An energy system, Naira said. One that threatens the economic structure of the Orion Ring. Elias nodded. That's one way to put it. You destabilize power, Naira continued. You make entire industries obsolete. Governments fall when their energy control disappears. And that's why they want me dead. Yes. Elias leaned forward slightly. And what do you think? Naira's eyes narrowed. My opinion is irrelevant. Is it? Yes. Elias shook his head. I don't think so. Naira's voice sharpened. You don't get to question me, and you don't get to ignore yourself, he replied calmly. The words struck harder than they should have. Naira frowned. This is pointless. Is it? Elias gestured toward the mug. You drank the coffee. That proves nothing. It proves you're willing to consider something outside your directives. Naira's hand moved slightly toward her weapon. Careful. Elias didn't flinch. I am, he said softly. Very. Outside, the suspended rain shimmered as a transport ship passed, casting shifting patterns of light across the cafe. Naira's mind raced. This wasn't going according to plan. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't negotiating. He wasn't even trying to escape. He was talking. And somehow, that was more dangerous. You think you can convince me to walk away, she said. No, Elias replied. I think I can convince you to choose. I've already chosen. Have you? Naira's jaw tightened. Yes. Then why are you still here? The question landed like a blade. Naira opened her mouth to respond. Stopped. Because she didn't have an answer. Elias reached into his coat and pulled out a small device, no larger than a coin. He placed it on the table between them. Naira's sensors immediately locked onto it. Energy readings spiked, but not in a way she'd ever seen before. What is that? She asked. This, Elias said, is the reason they're afraid. Naira leaned closer. The device pulsed softly, emitting a faint, steady glow. It doesn't draw power, Elias continued. It doesn't store it. It doesn't convert it. Then what does it do? Elias met her eyes. It creates it. Naira froze. That's impossible. That's what they said. Energy couldn't be created. Not without cost. Not without consequence. It was the fundamental law of every system in the galaxy. Perpetual generation violates. Everything we thought we knew, Elias finished. Naira stared at the device. If this is real, it is. Then the entire energy economy collapses. Yes. Control systems fail. Yes. Governments lose their leverage, Elias said. Naira leaned back slowly. And you think that's a good thing? Elias didn't answer immediately. Instead, he picked up his own mug and took a sip. I think, he said finally, that no one should have to earn the right to survive. Naira's gaze sharpened. That's naive. Is it? Yes, she said firmly. Power structures exist for a reason. To control. To maintain order. Elias shook his head. Those aren't the same thing. Naira looked down at the device again. Her mission was clear. Eliminate the target. Secure or destroy the technology. Ensure stability. That was the contract. That was the purpose. But for the first time in years, it felt incomplete. You're asking me to betray my employers, she said. I'm asking you to think, Elias replied. Naira's voice dropped. If I don't kill you, someone else will. I know. You can't outrun this. I'm not trying to. Then what are you doing? Elias smiled faintly. Buying time. For what? For someone to decide that this is worth protecting. Naira's fingers tightened around the mug. And you think that someone is me? Elias shrugged. I think you're here. Silence fell again. The cafe seemed quieter now, the distant hum of the station barely audible. Naira stared at her reflection in the surface of the coffee. An assassin. A weapon.
A tool.
That's what she'd always been. That's what she'd been made to be. But sitting here, across from a man who should have been dead already, she felt something unfamiliar.
Choice.
It was unsettling. Dangerous. Liberating. You don't know anything about me, she said. Elias looked at her carefully. I know enough. Then say it. Elias leaned forward slightly. I know you didn't drink the coffee because you trusted me, he said.
You
drank it because you wanted to prove me wrong. Naira's breath caught. And I know, he continued, that you haven't killed me yet because part of you wants me to be right. The words hit harder than any weapon. Naira stood abruptly. Stop. Elias didn't move. You're not my therapist, she snapped. No, he said calmly. I'm your target. Naira's hand hovered over her weapon. Then act like it. Elias met her gaze. I am. Time slowed. Naira drew her weapon in a single fluid motion, a sleek, silent blade of condensed energy. It hummed softly, its edge shimmering with lethal precision.
She pointed it at his chest.
Elias didn't flinch. Do it, he said quietly. Naira's grip tightened. Her training took over. Angle.
Distance.
Strike point. Everything aligned. One move. That's all it would take. But her hand didn't move. Why? She demanded. Elias's voice was steady. Because if you're going to decide the future, he said, you should at least understand what you're choosing. Naira's arm trembled slightly. She hated that. Hated the hesitation. Hated the doubt. You're manipulating me, she said. Yes, Elias admitted. Naira blinked. The honesty threw her off more than any lie could have. Why would you admit that? Because it's true. Naira stared at him. You're insane. Elias smiled faintly. Probably. Seconds passed. Then minutes. The blade remained raised. But it never fell. Finally, Naira exhaled.
Slow.
Controlled. And lowered the weapon. Elias didn't celebrate. Didn't react. He simply nodded.
Thank you, he said.
Naira deactivated the blade. This doesn't mean I've chosen your side, she said. I know. It means I haven't chosen yet. Elias gestured toward the chair. Then sit, he said. And take your time. Naira hesitated. Then she sat. Again. Outside, the suspended rain began to fall. Slowly at first, then faster. The station's stabilizers disengaged, releasing the droplets into a gentle cascade that pattered softly against the dome. Naira watched it. "Why here?" she asked. Elias followed her gaze. "Because it's one of the few places where people can still just exist." Naira frowned. "That sounds inefficient." Elias chuckled. "It is." She picked up the mug again. Took another sip. The warmth felt different now. Less foreign. More familiar. "If I walk away," she said, "they'll send others." "I know. If I protect you, I become a target." "Yes." "If I destroy that device," she glanced at the coin on the table, "everything stays the same." Elias nodded. "Yes." Naira looked at him. "And you're okay with leaving that decision to me?" Elias met her eyes. "I have to be." Naira leaned back in her chair. For the first time in years, she wasn't following orders. She wasn't executing a plan. She was deciding. The weight of it was immense, terrifying, and strangely empowering. She looked down at the device, then at the mug, then at Elias. "You're either the most dangerous man in the galaxy," she said, "or the most foolish." Elias smiled. "Why not both?" Naira almost smiled back. Almost. Minutes turned into an hour. They talked. Not as target and assassin, but as two people standing on the edge of something vast and uncertain. Naira asked questions. Elias answered. And sometimes he asked questions back. When Naira finally stood to leave, the rain had stopped. The station lights glowed softly against the damp surfaces. She paused at the door. "Elias." "Yes." She didn't turn around. "If I come back, I'll have another mug ready," he said. Naira hesitated, then nodded, and stepped out into the night. Behind her, Elias picked up the empty mug. Still warm. He smiled faintly, not because he was safe, but because, for the first time, he wasn't alone in the fight. And somewhere in the vast, silent expanse of space, the future shifted. Not with a weapon, not with a war, but with a choice. And a warm cup of something human. Naira did not return the next day, nor the day after. Elias expected that. Assassins didn't move impulsively, not the kind sent for him. If she came back at all, it would be after careful calculation or not at all. Still, he made the coffee. Every day. 3 days later, the Orion trade ring issued a quiet alert. Not public, not official, but it spread like static through encrypted channels. Priority directive. Elias Cade must be terminated immediately. Authorization expanded. All assets permitted. They had lost patience. That meant one thing. They knew. Not everything, but enough. Naira stood atop a maintenance spire overlooking Halcyon Station's inner ring, her cloak rippling in the artificial wind currents. Below her, ships traced lines of light through the dark, like veins carrying the lifeblood of an empire built on energy control. Her HUD pulsed with incoming transmissions. New contract. Higher payout. No restrictions. Multiple teams deployed. She closed the feed. Her decision had been made hours ago. She just hadn't said it out loud yet. The first strike team arrived at dawn cycle. Sleek. Efficient. Corporate sanctioned. They breached the cafe dome without subtlety, cutting through the transparent steel with thermal lances, dropping in with weapons drawn. Elias didn't run. He was behind the counter, pouring coffee.
"Morning," he said.
They didn't respond. Their leader raised a rifle. "Dr. Cade, you are." The lights went out. Darkness swallowed the cafe. Then, silence. Not the absence of sound. The absence of presence. The strike team froze. Their sensors flickered. Targets vanished. Signals scrambled. Then, one by one, They fell.
Clean. Precise.
Silent. By the time the emergency lights flickered back on, Naira stood in the center of the room. Her blade hummed softly, then powered down. Elias looked at her. You came back. Naira didn't answer. Instead, she glanced at the fallen operatives. Amateurs, she muttered. Elias raised an eyebrow. They looked well-equipped. They were, she said. Just not enough. She stepped closer. They've escalated. I figured. More will come. I know. Naira met his gaze. And I've made my choice. Elias studied her carefully. You're sure? He asked. No, she said honestly. But I'm done pretending I don't have one. She pulled something from her cloak and placed it on the table. A data core. Encrypted. Military grade. Elias's eyes narrowed. What is that? Everything they have on you, Naira said. Locations, projections, contingency plans.
He stared at it.
That's a lot of trust. Naira shook her head. No, she said. That's me burning the bridge behind me. Elias nodded slowly. Then we should get moving. They didn't leave through the front. Within minutes, Naira had them moving through maintenance corridors, service shafts, and forgotten transit veins that ran beneath the polished surface of Halcyon Station. Elias struggled to keep up. You've done this before, he said between breaths. Naira didn't slow down. I was trained to disappear. And now? She glanced back briefly. Now I'm making sure you don't. The second wave hit before they reached the outer ring. Drones this time.
Dozens of them.
Autonomous. Relentless. They flooded the corridor ahead like a metallic tide, weapons charging. Naira reacted instantly. Down. Elias dropped as Naira leapt forward, her movements a blur of precision and controlled violence. Blades flashed. Drones shattered. Energy bolts scorched the walls. The narrow corridor became a storm of sparks and motion. Elias watched in stunned silence. This was what she was. What she had always been. A weapon. But now, pointed in a different direction. When the last drone fell, Naira stood still for a moment, breathing hard. You okay? Elias asked. She nodded once. Keep moving. They reached the docking ring just as the station alarms began to sound. Not localized anymore. Global. The entire station was locking down. They're not just targeting you now, Naira said. Elias frowned. They're containing the area. No, she said grimly. They're containing us. At the far end of the docking bay, a single ship waited.
Small.
Unassuming. Naira's. Elias stared at it. That's our escape plan? It flies, she said. That's enough. They ran. Halfway there, the final obstacle arrived. Not drones. Not soldiers. Something worse. A null enforcer.
Tall.
Armored. Its presence distorted the air itself, an anti-energy field that disrupted systems, weapons, even Elias's device. Naira slowed. That's new, she said quietly. Elias felt the device in his pocket flicker. They're adapting. The enforcer stepped forward. Target confirmed. It intoned. Termination authorized. Naira drew her blade. It flickered. Weakened. Of course, she muttered. She looked at Elias. Get to the ship. What about you? I'll handle this. You can't. I can slow it down, she snapped. That's enough. Elias hesitated. Naira's voice softened. Just slightly. Go. He ran.
Behind him, the battle began.
Without full power, Naira fought differently. Not with overwhelming force, but with precision, timing, strategy. She used the environment, the narrow space, the enforcer's own weight against it. But it wasn't enough. Not completely. It adapted, learned,
advanced.
and slowly it pushed her back. Elias reached the ship.
He stopped.
Turned. He could leave. He should leave. That was the logical choice. Survive. Continue the mission. But he looked at the device in his hand. Infinite energy. A future without control. Without scarcity. Without this. Then he looked back at Naira. Still fighting. Still holding the line. For him. For a choice she didn't fully understand. Elias made his decision. He ran back. Naira saw him coming. Her eyes widened. What are you doing? Elias didn't answer. He pulled out the device. Overloaded it. The enforcer paused. For the first time uncertain. That thing cancels energy, Naira said. You can't. I'm not feeding it energy, Elias said. He smiled. I'm giving it something it doesn't understand. The device flared. Not like a weapon. Not like a bomb. But like a star being born.
Pure.
Uncontained. Impossible. The enforcer's field buckled.
Collapsed.
For a fraction of a second, it failed. Naira didn't hesitate. She struck. One clean motion. The enforcer fell. Silence. Naira stared at Elias. You're insane. Elias laughed, breathless.
Yeah, I've heard that.
She grabbed his arm. Now we go. They reached the ship together. This time, neither of them hesitated. The engines roared to life. The docking clamps released. And as the station's defenses closed in, they shot into the void. Behind them, Halcyon Station grew smaller. Ahead of them, everything. Naira sat in the pilot's seat, hands steady on the controls. Elias stood behind her, watching the stars stretch into lines. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then, where to? Naira asked. Elias thought for a moment, then smiled. Somewhere that needs power, he said. Naira glanced back at him. And after that? Elias shrugged. We'll figure it out. Naira turned forward again. A faint smile touched her lips. In the vast expanse of space, their small ship disappeared into the unknown. Not as fugitives. Not as enemies. But as something far more dangerous. Two people who had chosen their own path. And across the galaxy, the balance began to shift. Not through war. Not through conquest. But through something far simpler. And far more powerful. A choice. Shared. Protected. And carried forward. One warm mug at a time.